My name is Lucas. I'm 32 years old, and this story happened to me 14 years ago. At the time, I was 18 and living on an isolated farm, surrounded by dense vegetation and mysteries. Life in the countryside was hard but simple. I spent the entire week working under the relentless sun, tending to the cattle and keeping the farm in order. My friends were my neighbors, young like me, all eager for a bit of fun and adventure. On weekends, we would go to town to escape the routine. It was our ritual. As night fell on Saturday, we would head to town for a local party. We left around 6 in the evening, with the sky painted orange by the setting sun, and returned in the early hours of the morning, tired but satisfied. The way to town was long, a winding road we knew well. However, on that specific night, something was about to change. As we walked, one of my friends mentioned a little-known trail that cut across the road. He said that if we took it, we would save at least 15 minutes. It was a tempting proposal, but there was something strange in the air when he talked about it. I asked why we had never used this trail before, and the answer I received made my blood run cold. There were rumors about the trail. They told stories of a mysterious old man who whistled along the path. Whoever passed by would hear his eerie whistle, but no one dared to look back. The trail seemed like a perfect shortcut, but it carried an air of mystery and danger that we couldn't ignore. Despite the warnings, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to uncover the truth behind those rumors and was determined to convince my friends to take that path. The night was just beginning, and a dark trail awaited us. That night, as darkness spread like a cloak over the forest, my friends and I ventured onto the mysterious trail. The air was heavy, laden with an unsettling silence broken only by the rustling of leaves. The trail was narrow and winding, flanked by ancient trees whose canopies intertwined, forming a natural tunnel that blocked the moonlight. As we progressed, the tension mounted, each step seeming to take us deeper into an unknown abyss. One of my friends, Pedro, decided to break the silence with a story he had heard from his grandfather. He spoke of an old man who used to whistle during his walks along the trail. The whistle was a melancholic sound that reverberated through the trees, making anyone's skin crawl. It was said that whoever heard the whistle and looked back would never be the same. Pedro spoke in a whisper, as if afraid of awakening the whistler himself. The trail became steeper and the path more difficult. The silence around us was broken only by the sound of our footsteps and labored breathing. Suddenly, a soft, distant whistle began to fill the air. It was a delicate, almost hypnotic sound that seemed to draw closer and closer. We exchanged apprehensive glances, fear etched on our faces. The whistle, a sinister melody, reverberated in the darkness, each note a step nearer. Our hearts raced. Pedro whispered not to look back, but the temptation was almost irresistible. We kept walking, each step heavier than the last. The whistle grew louder, closer, until it seemed to resonate inside our heads. In a moment of sheer terror, I decided to quicken my pace, hoping to escape that terrifying sound. My friends followed suit, and soon we were running down the trail, not daring to look back. The path seemed to stretch on endlessly, each curve a new torment for our already frayed nerves. And then, without warning, the whistle ceased. The silence that followed was even more disturbing, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. We continued running until, finally, the trail opened into a clearing, and we saw the lights of the city in the distance. The sense of relief was palpable, but the terror of that night was far from over. As the clearing enveloped us, the city lights in the distance seemed like a sanctuary, a promise of safety. But the echo of the whistle still lingered in the air, a grim reminder of what we had left behind. We decided to enjoy the party in town to shake off the fear, but the experience on the trail continued to haunt us. After a few hours, when the moon was high in the sky and the party began to lose its luster, it was time to head back. We stopped at the usual road, our steps hesitant. The fear was still present, but an inexplicable need to confront the unknown pulled us back to the trail. Against all good sense, we decided we would return via the haunted path. As soon as we entered the trail again, the silence of the night intensified. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs under our feet. The air was heavy with an almost tangible tension. We started down the trail, and the whistling began again, louder and more piercing this time. Each note was a dart of fear, embedding itself in our hearts. My friends, driven by terror, began to run again, but something inside me resisted. A need to confront what was haunting us made me stop. The whistle continued, getting closer and closer. I felt the presence beside me, invisible but undeniable. I resolved that I needed to see, needed to understand what was tormenting us. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest, and slowly turned around. What I saw paralyzed me. The figure of the old man was there, his pale skin contrasting with the darkness around him. His eyes, empty and lost, reflected a light that did not come from the moon. He was unclothed, his body thin and hunched, a specter of suffering and despair. Before I could react, he whistled again, his eyes locking onto mine. I felt a penetrating cold, as if my own blood had frozen. In an impulse of self-preservation, I raised my hand and struck his face. Immediately, my hand became paralyzed. An indescribable terror overwhelmed me. Without looking back, I ran with all my strength, the whistle still echoing in my mind. I ran down the trail with my heart pounding in my chest, the sound of the whistle still echoing in my mind. When I finally reached my friend's house, panic was written all over my face. My friends, pale and breathless, welcomed me with wide eyes, clearly shaken by the sight of the old whistler. I raised my trembling arm and realized it was completely paralyzed, as if my blood had frozen in my veins. Pedro, always the most practical of the group, examined my arm with a concerned expression. He noticed my hand was white, without circulation. He began doing some exercises, trying to restore blood flow, while the others watched in a silence filled with fear and disbelief. Slowly, the color returned to my arm, but the relief was only momentary. What truly disturbed us wasn't the temporary paralysis of my arm, but the reality of what we had faced. It was undeniable that something supernatural inhabited that trail. Everyone was scared, but curiosity was a sweet poison that drove us to want to know more. The feeling that we were dealing with forces beyond our understanding was both terrifying and fascinating. As the initial fear began to subside, a heated discussion ensued. Should we go back to the trail? Should we seek more answers? Curiosity was palpable, and the desire to understand the inexplicable grew in our hearts. The sinister whistle still seemed to resonate in the darkest corners of our minds, a macabre call we couldn't ignore. So, we decided that the next night, we would return to the trail. This time, we would be prepared to face whatever that presence was. With flashlights, cameras, and renewed determination, we prepared for a confrontation that could lead us to uncover the darkest secrets of that forest. Night was approaching, and with it, the whistle that promised more mysteries. Night fell upon us like a heavy, silent cloak as we finally decided to return to the trail. We were determined to uncover the mystery that haunted us. Equipped with flashlights, cameras, and a forced courage, we prepared to face the unknown. The sinister whistle still echoed in our minds, a ghostly melody that drove us forward. As we walked through the dense forest, the air seemed to grow colder and heavier. The light from our flashlights cut through the darkness, but the shadows danced around us, creating unsettling shapes. Our steps were cautious, every sound amplified by the oppressive silence. The winding trail led us deeper into the darkness, and the tension between us was palpable. Suddenly, the whistling began again, louder and more disturbing than before. We stopped, our hearts racing, looking at each other with a mix of fear and determination. We advanced slowly, the sound of the whistle guiding us like a macabre call. The figure of the old whistler emerged before us, his ethereal presence hovering in the darkness. This time, we were prepared. The cameras were turned on, capturing every detail. The old man's figure was even more terrifying up close. His pale, wrinkled skin, his empty eyes reflecting a spectral light, his thin, hunched body. He whistled, his eyes fixed on ours, as if inviting us to unravel his secret. With tremendous effort, I took a step forward. The old man continued whistling, his figure flickering in the flashlight beams. My friends stood by my side, their expressions a mix of terror and fascination. And then, he stopped whistling. A sepulchral silence took over, and the old man raised his hand, pointing to the darkness beyond the trail. We followed his gesture, our flashlights illuminating a hidden entrance in the vegetation. It was a cave, its mouth open like a sleeping monster. With hesitant steps, we approached, the old whistler watching us in silence. We entered the cave, the cold, damp air enveloping us. Inside, we found remnants of a forgotten life. Old objects, black and white photos, and symbols carved into the walls. It was as if we had stepped into another time, a place where the past and present intertwined. As we explored, the feeling of being watched grew, as if the spirits of those who had lived there were still present. In the center of the cave, we found an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. The words written there revealed the tragic story of a man who had lost everything: his family, his sanity, his life. His spirit, trapped by pain and remorse, haunted the trail, his whistle an eternal lament. As we read the diary's final words, the old whistler appeared beside us, his expression changed. He was no longer a figure of terror, but a soul seeking peace. We understood then that our encounter was not just about fear, but about liberation. We promised to help the tormented soul find rest. We left the cave with a new perspective, our cameras filled with evidence of the supernatural, but our hearts filled with empathy and understanding. The trail, which had once terrified us, was now a place of remembrance and redemption. And the whistle, once sinister, was now a gentle lament, echoing in the forest like a farewell song. This experience changed our lives forever. We learned that the unknown can be frightening, but it can also reveal deep truths and sometimes set lost souls free. And so, the trail in the forest became a symbol of our courage and compassion, a place where the past and present meet, and where peace can finally be found.